A Formula One car at 360 kilometers per hour. A man jumping from the edge of space. A rider clearing a jump that shouldn't be possible. These are the images that come to mind when you hear a certain name. But here's what's strange. None of these things are the product. The product is this. A slim silver and blue can. A sweet carbonated drink, 250 milliliters, about the size of your palm. That's it. Nothing special. So why, when you see a Formula One car doing 200 miles per hour through Monaco, do you immediately think of a beverage? Why does one of the most extreme athletic events in human history remind you of something you can buy at a petrol station for €2? The answer is one of the most carefully constructed illusions in the history of business. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. If you're new here, this channel is about understanding what's really going on behind the decisions, the strategies, and the moments that shape the world we live in. If that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing. Now, let's get into it. The drink itself is simple. Caffeine, taurine, sugar. One product, one size. For years, that was it. Nothing revolutionary, nothing complex. And yet, it became one of the most powerful brands in the world. Red Bull didn't invent the formula. It found it. An Austrian entrepreneur, Dietrich Mateschitz, discovered a version of it in Thailand, adapted it for Western consumers, and brought it back to Europe in 1987. There was no food line, no clothing range, no technology division, just the drink. By every traditional business logic, Red Bull should have been a niche product. Maybe something you'd find behind the counter at a gym or at a late-night pharmacy. A functional drink for tired people. That's not what happened. Today, Red Bull generates over €10 billion in annual revenue. It is sold in more than 175 countries, and it has built something that no other beverage company has ever come close to replicating. But the reason why has almost nothing to do with the drink. In the late 1980s, Red Bull made a decision most companies would never make. They didn't try to sell to everyone. They chose a very specific person. Young, ambitious, restless. Not just someone who needed energy, but someone who wanted to feel like they had more of it than everyone else. So they didn't advertise. No TV campaigns. No billboards. Instead, they went directly to where those people were. University campuses, nightclubs, late-night bars. They didn't push the product. They embedded it. Student ambassadors handing out cans, showing up where energy mattered, making it part of the environment, sometimes before it even existed there. They would leave empty Red Bull cans on tables in bars that didn't even sell it yet, creating the illusion of demand before the demand was real. Think about that. They didn't follow attention. They created it, and it worked. Because in the early 90s, seeing a Red Bull wasn't just about the drink. It meant something. It meant this is where things happen. These are the people who don't slow down. Word spread, not through ads, but through association. And by the mid-90s, Red Bull was growing fast. But the founders understood something most companies never do. Drinks can be copied. Formulas can be replicated. What can't be copied is a feeling. And that realization changed everything. Red Bull began spending more money on marketing than it did on almost everything else. At one point, they were allocating roughly a third of their total revenue, not profit, revenue, to marketing and brand building. That is an almost insane number by conventional standards. Most consumer goods companies spend between 5 and 15%. Red Bull was running at nearly 30. But here's the critical detail. They weren't spending it the way other companies would. No celebrity endorsements for products they didn't use. No Super Bowl ads with 30-second comedy sketches. No partnerships with morning news programs. Instead, they moved into sports. Specifically, extreme sports. The kind that, at the time, had no corporate sponsor, no television deal, and almost no mainstream coverage. cliff diving, freestyle skiing, base jumping, mountain biking on terrain that most people wouldn't walk on. Events held at the edge of human capability. Events that most brands stayed far away from because they were too dangerous, too niche, too unpredictable. Red Bull walked straight in. And in doing so, they didn't just sponsor athletes, they became synonymous with the kind of person those athletes represented: fearless, high performance, unconventional. The athletes weren't selling Red Bull, they were Red Bull. But what came next was where the strategy truly became something else entirely. Most companies sponsor events. Red Bull started creating them. This is a subtle but enormous distinction. When you sponsor an event, your logo appears on a banner. People might notice it, they might not. The event happens with or without you. You are a feature, not a foundation. When you create an event, you own the narrative. You control the imagery. You decide what the thing means. Red Bull launched the Red Bull Air Race, the Red Bull Crashed Ice, the Red Bull Cliff Diving World Series, the Red Bull Rampage, a mountain biking competition so extreme that riders have been hospitalized attempting it. Events that didn't exist before Red Bull decided they should. And they didn't just run these events, they filmed them. They produced cinematic quality video content and distributed it years before the term content marketing was part of anyone's vocabulary. They built an entire media division, Red Bull Media House, which today produces documentaries, films, music, and sports coverage that has absolutely nothing to do with selling a drink. It produces content because content is how you control the association between your name and the emotions people feel. At its peak, Red Bull Media House was licensing its content to television broadcasters. Red Bull was not paying to be on TV. Television networks were paying Red Bull. Let that land for a moment. A beverage company with one product in one size had built a media operation that broadcasters wanted to pay for. They had built the culture, and they had built the infrastructure to sustain it. But there was one move still to come, one that would make everything else look like a warm-up. In 2004, Red Bull purchased the Jaguar Racing Formula One team. In 2005, they acquired a second team, Minardi, and rebranded it as Scuderia Toro Rosso. Now they had two Formula One teams. This was considered by many in the industry to be an absurd gamble. Formula One was a sport dominated by manufacturers: Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, companies with decades of engineering heritage. Red Bull was a drinks company that had been in existence for less than 20 years. In 2010, Red Bull won the Formula One Constructors' Championship. Then again in 2011 and 2012 and 2013. 4 consecutive titles. The impact on global brand recognition is almost impossible to overstate. Formula One is broadcast in over 180 countries. Race weekends generate hundreds of hours of television coverage. The cars are some of the most photographed objects on Earth. Every single race, all season, in every country where Formula One is watched, that red and blue livery is on the screen. Not for 30 seconds, for hours. Week after week, year after year. Red Bull didn't buy advertising. They bought visibility at a scale that advertising cannot purchase. And unlike a sponsorship banner, a winning Formula One car doesn't just show you a logo. It shows you speed, precision, dominance. It makes you feel something. It makes you feel exactly what Red Bull has always wanted you to feel about the name on the can. Here's the thing that most analyses of Red Bull miss. They didn't build a marketing strategy around a product. They built a product around a marketing strategy. The drink was always, from the beginning, a vehicle. A physical object that gave people a reason to hand money to a brand. But the brand was never about the drink. Think about the last time someone said, "I love the taste of Red Bull." Now think about the last time someone said, "Red Bull is such a cool brand," or "I always drink Red Bull before I train," or "that Red Bull Stratus jump was insane." People don't buy Red Bull because they've done a caffeine comparison and concluded it offers the best value per milligram. They buy it because of what they believe holding that can says about them, about their energy, their mentality, the kind of person they see themselves as. In 2012, Red Bull sponsored Felix Baumgartner's free fall from 39 kilometers above the Earth. He broke the sound barrier in free fall. It was watched by 8 million people simultaneously on YouTube, setting a world record for a live stream at the time. It was, by every conceivable measure, not an advertisement. It was a news event, a moment in human history. But Red Bull's name was on the suit, the balloon, the capsule, and every single piece of coverage for the weeks that followed. They didn't advertise. They made history, and they put their logo on it. This is the architecture of what Red Bull built. Normal companies create products, then create campaigns to sell them. Red Bull created moments of genuine human achievement, excitement, and spectacle, and then attached their identity to those moments so completely that the two became inseparable. When you watch a cliff diver enter the water from 40 meters up, the feeling in your chest, that visceral rush, that is now associated with a logo. That is brand equity. Not manufactured in a focus group, not scripted in a boardroom, but felt in the body, in real time. Red Bull doesn't run many traditional TV commercials. Their famous animated campaign, the one with the tagline, "Gives you wings," was deliberately cartoonish, deliberately low-budget looking, because the real advertising was never on television. It was on the side of mountains, on the tarmac of race circuits, 39 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. While their competitors spent their budgets on 30-second slots between sitcoms, Red Bull was buying the moments that people would be talking about for years. And here is the final layer of the strategy, the one that makes it genuinely brilliant. The audience for Red Bull's content doesn't think of themselves as a target market. They think of themselves as fans, followers, people who are interested in the sport, the athlete, the event. Nobody watches the Red Bull Rampage and thinks, "I'm being marketed right now." They think, "This is the most impressive thing I have ever seen a human being do on a bicycle." The marketing is invisible because it has been replaced by something real. So what does Red Bull actually sell? Not energy. You can get caffeine from a cup of coffee for a fraction of the price. Not taste. That's never been the selling point. Not status in the traditional sense. It isn't a luxury product with a premium price barrier. What Red Bull sells is identity. Specifically, it sells the identity of someone who operates at their limits. Someone who doesn't back down, slow down, or sit still. Someone who is, to use their own phrase, always reaching for something higher. And it has built that identity not through what it says, but through what it shows. Not through claims about its product, but through the cumulative weight of 3 decades of associations. Every cliff diver, every championship title, every athlete who has worn the logo into the kind of moment most people will only ever watch on a screen. Red Bull understood something profound about how brands actually work. That people don't buy things. They buy what those things represent. They buy the story they get to tell about themselves when they choose one thing over another. Most companies try to tell you that story. Red Bull simply created so many real, undeniable moments of it that eventually you told the story yourself. The genius is in the restraint. They never oversold the drink. They never made it about what was inside the can. They kept the can small, simple, almost humble, and then surrounded it with the largest, most spectacular canvas of human performance they could construct. And the contrast between the two, between this modest silver container and the vast world of achievement they built around it, the contrast is the brand. Red Bull was never just a drink company that got into sports. It is a sports and media company that happens to sell a drink. And that distinction, quiet as it may seem, is the difference between a product and a legacy. The next time you reach for that can, ask yourself, is it the drink you want, or the feeling it already made you believe you'd have before you even opened it? In retrospect, stories behind the decisions, secrets, and turning points that shape our world.